In this lesson, we'll talk about the concept of attributes. Now, before we jump back into Houdini, I want to kind of start to describe attributes as we would if we were describing this picture. So an attribute is basically an adjective, if you will. It's something you can use to describe what you're seeing or describe what you have here. So we might say that here we have graham crackers, marshmallows, and a little bit of chocolate. You could also say that we have a dessert overall. Now, each of the things that make up that dessert, like the graham crackers, the marshmallow, and the chocolate, all have different individual things that you could say about them as well. We could say that this graham cracker is brown. Therefore, we're describing its color. We're giving it a color attribute, if you will. We could also say that it is on top of the marshmallow. In that case, we'd be giving it a position attribute, right? We're saying where it is as a part of this overall dessert. We could say something about the chocolate. We could say that the chocolate looks runny, that it's been melted. We could say that the marshmallow is white and therefore describing its color. So all of the different ingredients that make up this overall dessert can have their own individual descriptions, as well as we can describe the dessert as a whole as sweet. Well, let's cross-apply those same concepts over to the Houdini world. So what we've got here is just a simple box, and I've given the box a division in the middle so that it's actually made up of some different parts. Now, what I want to do is to be able to see my geometry spreadsheet at the same time that I'm viewing my scene view. And we talked about how we can split up the interface to see multiple parts of it at the same time back when we discussed the UI in an earlier lesson. We can do that here by using the Pane Tab Operations dropdown. So I'm just going to click and hold and come down to Split Pane Top Bottom. That'll give me this second pane that I can work with down here. And instead of the scene view, what I want is my geometry spreadsheet. I can change that by holding down the Pane Tab Operations for this lower pane here, and then choosing Set Pane Type, and then choose my geometry spreadsheet, which is right here. So now I'm able to see my geometry spreadsheet and my geometry in my scene view at the same time. So all we have is this box right now. And the ingredients that make up this box are the details, which we see here in the geometry spreadsheet, the primitives, the vertices, and the points. So all four of these things have attributes that help us to describe what's going on with this box. Well, right now we're looking at the detail attributes. And the detail attributes apply to every element in the box. Back in our picture, it would be like when we called this dessert sweet. We're just describing the overall concept of what it is as sweet. We're describing its flavor attribute, if you will. Well, let's go ahead and describe the color attribute of this box. So to do that, I'm going to lay down a color node. So I'm just going to take a color node here. We'll drop it, wire it up, move our display flag down to color. Now, if we look in the parameters view for color, it's asking us, where do we want to apply this attribute? So right now, it's applying it at the points. Let's go ahead and change that over to details. Now, as soon as I do, you can see that I've added this description of color to the detail element of the box. So let's change it from white so this makes a little bit more sense. I'm just going to click on this little color here and we'll change it over and we'll make it red. So you can see here I have my RGB red, green, and blue color values. And depending upon how I move the sliders, of course, I can populate those values and get different colors. But for simplicity's sake, let's just go ahead and make it red, pure 1, and then green 0 and blue 0. So with that accepted, we can see now that my box is red in my scene view. And if I look in my geometry spreadsheet, I can see that the colors are listed here under the detail attributes. So I've given an attribute, an overall color to the box. I'm saying the box is red, just like I would say, hey, this dessert overall is sweet. Keep in mind that when you see CD anywhere in Houdini, whether it's in an expression or in the interface here, CD is just a short way of saying color. It comes from way back in computer graphics when they first were developing CG. The term CD was a variable or just a short way of saying color. So here we see our color in red is 1, our color in green is 0, and our color in blue is 0 as well. So that's what happens when we apply color at the detail level. Now we also have individual primitives that we can work with. And if you remember when we were first learning the Poly Extrude tool, we were able to turn on our primitive numbers and we could see what each individual primitive was numbered. So I'm going to change this color, and instead of applying it at the detail level, I'm going to apply it at the primitive level. So now these elements of primitives, sort of like saying the marshmallow or the graham cracker, the individual things that make it up. So these primitives that make up the shape of this box now have a color value. Now each of the individual primitives, this particular one, primitive 0, has a color. Its color is red 1, green 0, blue 0. Well, all of them right now have the exact same attribute of color red 1, green 0, blue 0. The color node here gives us a parameter that will help us to visualize a little better how this concept is being applied. Instead of a color type of constant, meaning every single primitive is going to get the same color, let's randomize that. So now each individual primitive has its own color. In other words, each individual primitive has its own color attribute. And here in the geometry spreadsheet, we can see those attributes and how they're applied. And here we see color applied to each individual attribute. To each individual primitive. So as we look through the list here, primitive 0 has a color of 0.641601 of red, 0.731999 of green, and 0.088431 of blue. And that's unique to that individual primitive, and that's because we're applying this color at the primitive level. And that color is an attribute. We're just describing each color of each primitive. Well, one of the other ingredients that makes up this box, just like we have multiple ingredients here, like the marshmallow, the graham cracker, and the chocolate, one of the other ingredients that makes up this box are vertices. So let's display the vertice attributes here. Now, right now, we don't really have any. I'm going to go ahead and change my color. We're going to apply this now to the vertices. So we're going to describe the vertices color. So the class, instead of being primitive, we'll turn it to vertex. Now each individual vertex has its own color. And we can see that if we zoom in here, we can see that this corner of this primitive, primitive 16, its top left vertex, has a color of sort of this off, green color. The bottom left vertex of primitive 18 has sort of this bluish color. And what also might help here is I'm going to turn on the vertex display, and you can do that using this icon on the far right-hand toolbar of the scene view. So the vertex just is describing these corners. So each corner of the primitive has a vertex, and those vertexes are unique to that primitive. In other words, it's blue. This vertex controls the blue value or the color attribute of primitive 18. Now that's how you see them here in the geometry spreadsheet as well. So these are our primitive numbers. If we look down here at primitive 18, it has 4 vertexes, or 4 vertices rather, each vertex being 0, 1, 2, and 3. So that would be 0, 1, 2, and 3. Now another element, or another ingredient, if you will, that makes up this box is a point. Let's turn off our vertex display and turn off our primitive numbers, and instead let's turn on points. You can do that by clicking this little icon on the right-hand toolbar here. So points are these little dots, these little blue dots that we're seeing in our screen. And let's go ahead and change our color now, and we're going to apply color to the points. Okay, we notice as soon as we do here in our geometry spreadsheet, the attribute of color no longer exists on the vertex. We took it away from the vertices here, and we're going to apply it to the points. Now if we look over in points, we have some different attributes. We have the attribute of color. So each point now has its own color, just like each vertex did, each primitive did. They now have their own red, green, and blue values. Points by default also have another attribute, and that attribute is position. Position just describes where those points are located in space, in X, Y, and Z coordinates. So here you can see multiple attributes being applied at the point level. So we can turn on point numbers as well, and we can kind of focus in on one particular point or another. So here we see point 0. Well, point 0 has a coordinate of 0.5 in X, negative 0.5 in Y, and 0.5 in Z. That describes the location of this individual point. Now you might be wondering, what is the difference between a point and a vertex? Well, if you look at the color here, it will help sort of describe that. When we looked at our vertices, or individual vertex attributes, we noticed that each corner had its own color. Let's go ahead and just switch this back real quick to vertex, and I'll show you what I'm saying. So the vertex, let's display those here. Turn off our point numbers, make this a little cleaner. So this vertex has its own color of this sort of light green. This vertex up here has its own color of sort of a darker blue color. If we change our color down to points, now you'll notice that this point color of sort of a purpley color is applied to all 4 of those vertexes. Okay, so what a point is it's either position or color or any other attribute that you want to use to describe that particular point. That attribute will be applied to everything that it touches. You can notice that here. If we zoom in, we have this blue color, and it's being applied to every single thing that it touches. Okay? So vertex refers to the individual corners of the primitives as to where the point is describing that one intersection where kind of the crossroads of those edges meet. So the point refers to the shared position, and the vertex refers to the individualized, unique corners for each primitive. And that is attributes. Attributes just describe things. And geometry in Houdini is made up of these things: points, vertexes, primitives, and then you have detail attributes that can describe the overall piece of geometry. So now that we have a little bit better understanding of attributes and how they work, let's see how we can use this knowledge to fix a problem that we had in the previous lesson.